1.
When I'm working out, I love to listen to your podcast.
Whenever you say something, other people react to it.
Taking my breath away, Aaron.
Vern Lundquist joins me. Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun. NASCAR icon Dale Earnhardt Jr. Kirk Herbstreit is on the phone.
Here we go.
Oh, he's so handsome. What's his name?
Really quickly, on the coaching carousel front, there was a second piece of news and a second kind of news cycle that really was fascinating on top of the Mike Tomlin stuff, and it came courtesy of our old buddy James Franklin. And I'll just be honest, I think a lot of you guys are tired of hearing about James Franklin. I talked about him on Sunday's show, Monday's show, in terms of has he lost a little luster with some of these coaching jobs, but his name continues to be in the news. He continues to kind of give less strong denials than Mike Tomlin. And there was a very interesting piece of news that came out of James Franklin's camp earlier this week in terms of the coaching carousel stuff. So first of all, he was asked about it again on Tuesday at his press conference and gave just about the worst answer that you can give in terms of having to deal with the questions about these jobs. Mike Tomlin was asked about kind of all these situations being linked to LSU, being linked to USC. And again, I would say this with James Franklin as well. He's been linked to a lot of prominent jobs over the years. If he had interest in none of them, his name would not be there. Clearly, he has at least some interest in seeing what else is out there, even if he ultimately stays at LSU or at Penn State, But here is what James Franklin said when he was asked about these coaching jobs. He said, "My focus is completely on Illinois," which is, of course, we'll get into that in a minute. "My focus is completely on Illinois and this team and this program." That he's talking about Penn State. "I think I've shown over my 8 years my commitment to this university and this community, and that's kind of my statement." So here's the problem with that. My focus is completely on Illinois. Penn State is playing playing Ohio State this week. Penn State is playing Ohio State. They're playing Ohio State. They're not playing Illinois. They played Illinois last week. So it's obviously a Freudian slip, but there were 2 or 3 times in his press conference where he was talking about being fully focused on Illinois. If you're fully focused on the opponent ahead, you know the opponent ahead is Ohio State. And I'm not going to pick him apart and tear him to shreds and say, it's clear that he's out because he had a Freudian slip. But what I would also say is this. There was a very, very, very interesting piece of news that came out this week as it pertains to James Franklin. And that interesting piece of news was this. Over the course of the last couple weeks, I think footballscoop.com was the first place to have this, so credit to them if they were, in fact, the first one. Over the last couple weeks, James Franklin has switched agents, okay? He had a guy named Trace Armstrong. I don't know a ton about Trace Armstrong. I believe he is Urban Meyer's agent. But he switched to Jimmy Sexton. He has changed agents, okay? So first of all, a little bit of background. Why is this important? One, Jimmy Sexton is basically the Scott Boras of college football. He is a big you-know-what swinger in college football circles. When you want to get yourself a fat contract, you sign up with Jimmy Sexton. Again, he is a ruthless, shrewd negotiator. Every time you see one of these weird, bizarre, one-sided negotiations, usually Jimmy Sexton is behind it. When Jimbo Fisher gets a raise from $7.5 million per year to $9 million, even though he didn't make the playoff, Jimmy Sexton is his agent. When Nick Saban, he could be interested in going to Texas. Alabama, you better throw him a few more million dollars. Well, guess who was behind that? Jimmy Sexton. Jimbo Fisher even, how about this? Jimbo Fisher is making $9 million a year. He does not have a buyout at Texas A&M, meaning that if he wanted to leave to coach UConn next year, which would be awesome, by the way, he wouldn't owe Texas A&M $1. So usually these contracts are front-loaded in this kind of context where if you're making a lot of money, it also takes a lot of money to get you to leave. I'll give you a cross-sport example. Nate Oates, I think the smartest thing that Alabama football did, or Alabama basketball, when Nate Oates got hot last year, they signed him to this huge extension. Good for him, $4 or $5 million, whatever he makes. But the buyout to get him out of his contract was something insane, like $12 million. So for another school, for North Carolina, for Kentucky, for Duke, one of those schools wants Nate Oates, they want to have a conversation with him, it's going to take $10 million just to get Nate Oates out of his contract to come to your school. And so I bring this up because Jimbo Fisher, it costs $0. If Jimbo Fisher decides he wants to leave, $0. So Jimmy Sexton is, I'm getting way off topic here. James Franklin. Let's get back to James Franklin. I went from James Franklin to Nate Oates. I don't know. I'm the only podcast host in America that could do that. But here's the deal. James Franklin switched agents from Trace Armstrong to Jimmy Sexton this week, and I will take you behind the curtain of how all of this stuff works in terms of what it all means in the bigger picture. You guys are smart as fans, so I believe you know most of this, but let me just explain. You don't switch agents in the middle of a year if you plan on dealing with the status quo. If you're happy at Penn State, you're making whatever, $6 million a year, it doesn't really matter. And you just think, you know what, I got 4 years left on my deal. I'm happy here. We're good. We're having a great old time. Family loves it. Kids love it. First grade, second grade, whatever. You don't hire a new agent in the middle of the season. It makes no sense. You know, what are you going to hire a new agent for? No, you hire a new agent if you are planning on one of two things. Either squeezing Penn State for every dollar that they are worth with two marquee jobs open up, LSU and USC. That's one reason to hire an agent. You don't really want to leave, but you want to make sure you get every dollar out of Penn State in the process, and you have to convince them that you are going to leave. And that's why you hire the new agent, so that you end up as one of the 5 highest paid coaches in America while staying at the job. The more realistic situation, though, you hire the new agent because you are ready to get another job, and you cannot talk to other schools during the course of the season. Like, you can't do it. Yeah, LSU's AD can't call James Franklin on a Wednesday night and say, hey, James, what are you doing? Let's talk about this LSU gig. No. James Franklin has a team to coach. There are protocols. There are etiquette. There are rules. I don't know enough about how all these contracts are written. I don't know if it would be a breach of contract for James Franklin to actually speak to LSU or USC. But if James Franklin wants USC or wants LSU to know, hey, just putting it out there, but I am very interested in being your next head football coach, that's where he puts his agent in charge, and that's where he not only puts his agent in charge, but he starts laying down some of what he is expecting or hoping for as the next head coach at either LSU or USC. Now, in terms of what's next, what I would say, what's interesting is what I talked about on Monday's show. James Franklin could have won out. He better start winning some games, though. He better be competitive this weekend against not Illinois, James Franklin, but Ohio State. Because, listen, I know enough about the LSU fan base. It's going to be a tough sell to bring in a 7-5 football coach. If James Franklin, currently 5-2, they still have Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State on their schedule. And I can tell you from USC's perspective, that will be a really tough sell. Because USC, in the heart of LA, I've talked about this job over and over and over and over again, but in the heart of LA, with all of the professional sports teams are awesome. Think about all of them, all of the ways you can spend money as a sports fan if you live in Los Angeles right now. You can go see the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James. You can go see the Los Angeles Clippers, who are now good. There are 2 NFL teams that are awesome. The Rams might win the Super Bowl. Justin Herbert might be the best young quarterback in the NFL. The Dodgers are awesome every single year. USC's in a tough predicament here because I think they really want James Franklin. I think James Franklin wants to go to USC. James Franklin better start winning some games. And so I'm getting off on a tangent. I went to Nate Oates. I'm all over the place. But the point I'm trying to bring up is pretty straightforward, is that you do not hire a new agent in the middle of the football season if you plan on keeping status quo. Either he is going to squeeze Penn State for every dollar that they're worth, or more realistically, he is looking for a way out. He is starting to lay the groundwork for a way out. And it's not as though his comments on Tuesday did a great job of convincing people otherwise. All right,